The desert sun beat down with a force that could kill. Ancient Egyptians did not just endure it, they engineered brilliant defenses against its rays. Their survival depended on a sophisticated system of sun protection, methods we are only now beginning to fully understand by putting them to the test. In this journey, you will discover which of their ingenious creations actually worked and why some of their solutions were centuries ahead of their time. We will uncover how a civilization without modern science crafted linen armor, used makeup as a shield, and designed entire cities for shade. How much of their ancient wisdom can still protect us today? The Egyptian sun was a paradox of creation and destruction. Its light gave life to the crops along the Nile, a gift from the god Ra himself. But step away from the river's edge and that same sun became a merciless enemy. The heat did not just feel warm, it was a physical weight, an unrelenting pressure that could bake mud bricks solid. This was not merely discomfort, it was a daily battle for survival. The ultraviolet radiation, invisible and undetectable to them, was a constant threat. Without adequate protection, a farmer tending his fields or a laborer building a monument would face more than just exhaustion. Dehydration could set in within hours, leading to crippling heat stroke. Their skin, over a lifetime of exposure, would bear the damage we now understand as premature aging and even lesions. The sun was their chief deity, but it was also a silent killer demanding respect. This duality forced the ancient Egyptians to become masters of adaptation, innovating not for comfort but for their very lives. Their survival tactics were born from brutal necessity. We have uncovered evidence on the mummies themselves, preserved for millennia, that tells a stark story. Modern examinations using advanced imaging have revealed lesions on ancient Egyptian skin, growths we now recognize as signs of skin cancer. These were not isolated cases. For a population spending their entire lives under an unshielded sun, the cumulative damage was immense. A laborer dragging stone blocks for a pharaoh's pyramid or a soldier on patrol in the desert faced a more immediate threat than cancer, however. Sunstroke was a constant danger. In that extreme heat without adequate hydration and shade, the body's core temperature can rise to fatal levels within hours. Confusion, dizziness, and collapse would precede a swift, silent death on the sands. This was not about avoiding a sunburn for appearances. It was about preventing a shutdown of the body itself. Protecting their skin and eyes directly influenced their life expectancy and their ability to work, to build, and to fight. The quality of their entire life hinged on winning this daily battle against the sun. So how did they engineer their first line of defense, a protection woven into the very fabric of their daily existence? Their first shield was woven from the very plants that grew along the life-giving Nile. For the common farmer, the laborer, the fisherman, their primary defense was not a potion or a pot, but the simple, brilliant design of their clothing. They wore garments crafted almost exclusively from linen, a fabric spun from the fibers of the flax plant. This was not the heavy, dense linen we might think of today. It was a remarkably lightweight and breathable material woven into a loose, open grid. Think of it as a microscopic sieve. This delicate structure was their genius. It acted as a physical barrier, blocking a significant portion of the sun's direct rays from striking the skin, while its countless tiny holes allowed the desert breeze to flow through effortlessly. This constant ventilation pulled sweat away from the body, creating a natural evaporative cooling system that kept their core temperature stable under the blazing heat. The color of this fabric was just as important. They overwhelmingly favored undyed, natural linen, which meant their clothes were a pale, reflective off-white. Instead of absorbing the sun's energy as heat the way a dark color would, this light shade acted like a tiny mirror, bouncing a substantial amount of that solar radiation back into the atmosphere. And they covered up, Their typical styles were loose-fitting wraps and kilts that draped over the body, shielding the shoulders, back, and legs from direct exposure. This was the opposite of stripping down to cool off. They understood that creating a personal, climate-controlled layer of shade with their own clothing was far more effective than leaving their skin bare and vulnerable to the sun's full, punishing force. This was practical science woven directly into the fabric of their daily existence. But what about the parts of the body that clothing could not cover: the face, the eyes, the lips? For those vulnerabilities, they developed a defense that was both cosmetic and profoundly medicinal. To verify this ancient wisdom, modern researchers designed a simple yet powerful experiment. They sourced linen woven to match the precise patterns found in tombs, creating swatches of authentic Egyptian fabric. Alongside these historical recreations, they gathered samples of modern summer clothing, thin cotton and synthetic blends. The test apparatus was elegantly straightforward, a sheet of paper specially coated to be extremely sensitive to ultraviolet light. This paper turns a deep, dark purple the instant it is exposed to UV rays. The researchers placed each fabric swatch, from the loose Egyptian weave to the tight modern knit, directly on top of this reactive paper. Then they switched on a powerful solar lamp, a device that mimics the intensity of the Egyptian sun. For a set amount of time, the fabrics were bombarded with this artificial daylight, a controlled simulation of a day spent laboring under Ra's gaze. When the lamp turned off, the moment of truth arrived. They lifted the cloth samples to reveal the story told in shades of white and purple. Under the modern fabrics, the paper was often still a vibrant, dark purple, a clear sign that a significant amount of UV radiation had penetrated the material. But beneath the ancient Egyptian linen weave, the result was dramatically different. The paper was a pale, almost white lilac, a visual testament to its incredible blocking power. The open, grid-like structure of the linen, which one might assume would let all the light through, had in fact scattered and deflected a massive portion of the harmful ultraviolet rays. This was not a solid barrier, but a brilliant filter. It proved that the Egyptians had, perhaps accidentally, perfected a fabric that balanced two vital needs. It blocked the radiation that could cause long-term damage, while its breathable nature managed the immediate, life-threatening risk of overheating. Their clothing was not just a cultural preference, it was a finely tuned piece of survival technology, tested and proven effective across thousands of years. But if linen was the shield for the body, what did they use to protect their most sensitive and exposed features, their eyes? The eyes were not the only vulnerable feature needing a dedicated defense. While their coal-lined gaze was shielded, the top of the head faced a more direct assault from the midday sun. For this, the ancient Egyptian crafted an elegantly simple piece of armor, the headcloth known as the klaft. This was not the ornate, striped Nemes headdress reserved for the pharaohs, but a practical, everyday garment for nearly everyone, from the nobleman overseeing an estate to the farmer in his field. It was typically a simple rectangle of striped linen, folded and wrapped around the head with an uncomplicated grace. The method of wrapping was its genius. The cloth was draped over the crown, covering the entire scalp, a surface that would otherwise absorb tremendous heat. The two long ends were then brought down to hang loosely over the shoulders, protecting the back of the neck and the sensitive tops of the ears from direct exposure and painful sunburn. This design created a personal, portable shade structure specifically for the head, the part of the body most susceptible to overheating. By preventing the sun from baking the scalp directly, the klaft played a crucial role in regulating the body's core temperature, stopping heat from building up at its most critical point. It was a universally accessible solution, a testament to a culture that understood sun protection was not a luxury, but a fundamental requirement for daily life. This logic of creating portable shade extended even further to an object so common we might overlook its ancient purpose entirely. The true test of any sun protection lies not in a laboratory but under the open sky. To understand the klaft's genius, we recreated the conditions an Egyptian laborer would have faced, placing 2 volunteers in a sun-drenched field for several hours. One wore a meticulously recreated linen klaft, its striped cloth wrapped in the traditional manner. The other wore a modern wide-brimmed synthetic hat, the kind you might buy for a day at the beach. Both were equipped with tiny skin sensors and observed by thermal imaging cameras that visualized heat in vivid color. The initial assumption was that the modern hat, with its complete, solid brim, would be the undisputed champion. The thermal footage, however, told a different story. As the hours passed, the modern hat began to act like a small greenhouse, trapping hot air against the scalp. The thermal camera showed a distinct, angry red glow concentrated on the crown of the head beneath the solid material. The klaft, in contrast, told a story of clever ventilation. Its loose, layered linen folds did not trap heat. Instead, the camera showed a cooler, more greenish-yellow pattern across the scalp as the constant breeze flowed through the fabric, carrying the heat away. This was a passive cooling system in action. The sensors on the neck revealed another critical advantage. The modern hat left the back of the neck completely exposed, a zone that quickly became hot to the touch and vulnerable to burning. The long, hanging ends of the klaft, however, draped over the shoulders, creating a constant, moving shade that kept the neck's temperature significantly lower and fully protected. When the volunteers described their experience, the difference was just as clear. The person in the modern hat reported a feeling of stuffiness and overheating on their head. The volunteer in the klaft spoke of a surprising sense of coolness and airiness despite the enveloping cloth. The ancient design was not just about blocking sun, it was about managing an entire thermal environment around the head. This simple rectangle of linen was a masterpiece of integrated design, solving for radiation, heat, and airflow all at once. It makes you wonder what other everyday objects from the ancient world held such hidden sophistication, waiting just beneath the surface of our understanding. While the common laborer relied on a simple linen wrap, the pharaoh required protection worthy of a god-king. The Nemes headdress, that iconic striped cloth framing the face of rulers like Tutankhamun, was far more than a crown. It was a statement of absolute power engineered for the ultimate sun defense. Woven from stiffened linen or sometimes even leather, the Nemes was a permanent, structured helmet. Unlike the soft, pliable klaft that could be rewrapped, this royal headdress held its rigid, pleated form at all times. Its design was meticulously calculated for maximum coverage. 2 broad panels fell from the crown down over each shoulder, shielding the entire upper chest. A third, longer piece draped down the center of the back, protecting the spine and the back of the neck completely. This was a full body extension of the same principle seen in the common headcloth, but amplified to a regal scale. The pharaoh, often depicted standing in his chariot or presiding over ceremonies in open courtyards, was exposed to the sun for hours. The Nemes ensured that even during these long, public displays of power, his skin remained untouched and unburned, a visible symbol of his invulnerability and divine favor. The choice of material was equally strategic. The stiffened fabric or leather did not just create an imposing silhouette, it also ensured a consistent, unwavering barrier. There were no loose flaps to be blown aside by the wind, no gaps to let the sun's rays slip through. Every pleat, every fold was a fixed component in a personal shade structure built for a living god. It projected an image of perfect, unassailable control over the very elements, a man so powerful he could command the sun itself to spare his skin. To build a pharaoh's crown is to reconstruct a thought process, a sequence of deliberate choices made thousands of years ago. Our team of textile specialists began not with fabric but with flax plants, harvesting the long fibers by hand just as the ancients did. They spun these into a linen so fine it felt like gossamer, yet possessed a surprising inherent strength. The first true challenge emerged with the starch. Historical accounts and tomb paintings hinted at a stiffening agent, a necessary step to transform this soft cloth into the rigid, pleated form of the Nemes. They experimented with solutions of wheat starch, boiling it down to a thick, translucent paste. The next step was a delicate art, brushing this hot liquid evenly onto the vast rectangle of linen without causing it to pucker or become brittle. The cloth had to be saturated just enough to hold a permanent crease, yet not so much that it turned into a stiff, unwearable board. It was a balancing act between structure and comfort, a problem an ancient Egyptian artisan would have solved through generations of trial and error. Once the linen was treated and dried to a parchment-like crispness, the team faced the puzzle of the stripes. The iconic blue and gold bands were not merely painted on. Using mineral pigments, ground lapis lazuli for the brilliant blue and ochre for the golden yellow, they mixed the powders with a binder of gum arabic to create a thick, vibrant paint. Each stripe was then meticulously applied by hand with fine brushes, a painstaking process that covered the entire headdress. The true test came during the pleating. They had to fold the heavy, painted cloth into its final form while the starch was still slightly pliable, creating the sharp, permanent grooves that would define the Nemes for eternity. One wrong fold, one miscalculation in the angle, and the entire structure would be thrown off. As they worked, a profound insight emerged. This was not a single piece of cloth, it was an exoskeleton. The stiffened, pleated fabric acted like a series of interlocking panels, each one designed to cast a specific shadow, to block the sun from a precise angle on the neck, the shoulders, and the back. The headdress was architecture in miniature, a personal, portable building engineered for one occupant, the king. Seeing the finished Nemes, resplendent in its bands of blue and gold, was to understand that its grandeur was not an empty symbol. Every aspect of its demanding construction served the practical, life-preserving function of creating an impenetrable shade for the most important man in Egypt. This level of engineered protection for the elite makes you wonder how the principles of shade scaled up, from a single headdress to an entire city designed as a collective sun shield. But the sun's assault did not end at the skin. Its most insidious attack was aimed directly at the eyes. The glare bouncing off the pale desert sands and the shimmering surface of the Nile could be blinding, a constant visual noise that led to headaches, squinting, and over time damaged vision. For this, the ancient Egyptians developed a defense that has become one of their most enduring cultural signatures, the iconic black eyeliner. This was not merely a cosmetic choice for the elite, it was a vital piece of protective gear worn by men, women, and even children from all walks of life. They called this substance Kohl, and its primary ingredient was a mineral called galena, a lead ore that was ground into an intense, velvety black powder. This powder was mixed with other ingredients like crushed malachite or animal fats to create a paste that was stored in ornate containers and applied with a small stick. The thick, dark lines rimming their eyes served a crucial optical function. By creating a stark, black border around the eyelids, the Kohl dramatically reduced the amount of blinding glare that could enter the eye. Think of a football player who smears black grease under his eyes to cut the glare from stadium lights. This is the same fundamental principle, just practiced thousands of years earlier. The dark pigment absorbed scattered light, sharpening vision and reducing the strain of living under a relentless sun. It was a brilliant fusion of medicine and aesthetics, where looking powerful and divine also meant being able to see clearly while working on the water or crossing the dunes. This mineral shield for the eyes reveals a society that thought about sun protection on a microscopic level, treating every vulnerable point on the body as a problem to be solved with elegant, effective engineering. To measure the Kohl's true power, we recreated its world. We brought 2 volunteers to a vast, sun-bleached sand dune, a landscape of blinding white reflections under a cloudless sky. One volunteer's eyes were bare, a condition no ancient Egyptian would ever willingly endure. The other wore a perfect recreation of their Kohl liner, the galena paste applied in the classic, thick almond shape that extended from the eyelids to the temples. Both were fitted with sophisticated eye-tracking glasses, devices that precisely map the pupil's movement and dilation, recording every involuntary squint and blink. For 2 hours, they performed simple tasks, reading hieroglyphic-like symbols from a distance and identifying objects placed across the sandy plain. The data streamed in real time to a nearby laptop, telling a story the naked eye could not see. The volunteer with no protection was constantly at war with the light. The eye tracker showed her pupils rapidly contracting into tiny pinholes, a desperate, automatic reaction to the overwhelming glare. The software logged hundreds of micro-squints, tiny facial muscle contractions as her eyes struggled to filter the harsh light. She reported a throbbing headache building within the first 30 minutes and described the experience as trying to see through a shimmering, painful veil. The volunteer wearing the Kohl, however, presented a completely different physiological profile. His pupil dilation remained remarkably stable, no longer yanked from wide to narrow by every bright reflection. The eye tracking data showed a 70% reduction in squinting. His subjective feedback was even more telling. He spoke of a pronounced visual calmness, a stark reduction in the disorienting scatter of light. The world appeared sharper, with clearer edges and defined contrasts, as if someone had turned down a blinding brightness dial. The thick black lines acted as a baffle, absorbing the stray light that would normally flood the periphery of his vision. This was not superstition, it was functional ocular science. The ancient Egyptians had engineered a solution that gave them a critical advantage in clarity and comfort, allowing them to work, navigate, and thrive in an environment that was actively trying to blind them. This mastery over light and vision makes you wonder how they applied the same ingenious principles to something as vast and permanent as their own homes. That striking black Kohl lining their eyes may have served a second, even more vital purpose. While our tests confirmed its power against blinding glare, another theory suggests this lead-based paste was also a form of ancient medicine. The primary ingredient, galena, is a compound of lead and sulfur. In the dusty, fly-filled environment of ancient Egypt, eye infections like conjunctivitis and trachoma were a constant threat, spread by grit, insects, and contaminated water. Lead compounds are now known to possess potent antibacterial properties. When the Egyptians applied their Kohl, the finely ground galena paste would have created a hostile environment for bacteria right at the most vulnerable point of entry, the moist inner rim of the eyelid. It likely acted as a preventative barrier, killing or inhibiting the growth of pathogens before they could cause a serious infection that might lead to blindness. This was not a one-time cure, but a daily prophylactic treatment. Every morning, as an Egyptian parent applied the dark lines to their child's eyes, they were not just adhering to a beauty standard. They were performing a ritual of protection, shielding those young eyes from both the sun's piercing rays and the invisible threats carried on the desert wind. The Kohl stick was in effect a dual-purpose tool, simultaneously sharpening vision for the day's work and guarding against a slow, creeping sickness. This fusion of optical engineering and preventative health care reveals a society that intuitively understood the connection between environment and wellness, solving two problems with one elegantly simple dark line. Yet this personal armor only went so far. For the true elite, their sun protection extended beyond their own bodies, carried literally by the hands of others. Shade itself became a portable commodity, a moving sanctuary of shadow. High officials and royalty were almost never exposed to the direct sun during public appearances. They were accompanied by servants known as shade bearers, men whose sole duty was to carry large, fan-like screens or primitive umbrellas constructed from dried papyrus reeds and adorned with ostrich feathers. Think of a laborer toiling in a sun-baked quarry, his only relief the fleeting shadow of a passing cloud. For a vizier supervising the work, his personal cloud was always directly overhead, a man-made shield held aloft by an attendant who walked a step behind him. This was not about comfort alone, it was a profound display of status and power. A nobleman traveling by boat along the Nile would recline under a canopy, while a shade-bearer on the deck ensured no stray ray of sun touched his master's skin. During lengthy outdoor ceremonies where a pharaoh or high priest might stand for hours, these portable shadows were absolutely essential. They allowed for the performance of ritual and the display of authority without the associated physical toll. The shade-bearer was a walking piece of architectural shade, a human pillar holding up a roof that sheltered just one person. This system transformed the environment on demand, creating a bubble of controlled climate that moved with the elite wherever they went. It raises a compelling question: if they could engineer portable shade for a single individual, what staggering structures did they create to protect an entire population from the sun's relentless gaze? The shade-bearer's role was to create a moving island of coolness in a sea of sun. We sought to reconstruct his most important tool, the portable sunshade. Our blueprint came not from an engineer's manual, but from the vivid scenes painted on the walls of noble tombs. These images showed not simple parasols, but elegant, curved screens made from dried papyrus reeds, often fringed with ostrich feathers. The construction began with the frame, a semi-circular arc of flexible willow wood, chosen for its strength and ability to hold a curve. This was lashed together with linen cord, creating a structure about 3 feet across. The shading surface itself was the next challenge. We harvested papyrus reeds, splitting them and weaving them into a tight, mat-like sheet. This mat was then securely tied to the wooden frame, creating a solid barrier against the sun. The final touch was a fringe of pure white ostrich feathers along the curved edge, a detail straight from the tomb paintings that was far from decorative. In the test, we discovered these feathers acted as a subtle air diffuser, gently disrupting the boundary layer of hot air immediately around the person, enhancing the cooling effect. The completed sunshade was surprisingly lightweight, and when mounted on a long, straight pole, it felt balanced and easy for a single person to hold aloft. But would this ancient design actually create a sanctuary from the heat, or was it merely a symbolic prop for the elite? To find out, we took our recreation to the proving grounds of the desert itself. We positioned a volunteer in the open under the midday sun, a stand-in for an ancient Egyptian official. A digital thermometer recorded the air temperature in direct sunlight, a blistering 110 degrees Fahrenheit. We then had a second volunteer, our modern shade-bearer, hold the papyrus sunshade directly over the first person's head and shoulders. The temperature sensor was moved into the center of the created shadow. The results were immediate and dramatic. Within just 90 seconds, the digital readout began to fall, stabilizing at a full 15 degrees cooler than the surrounding air. This was not just shade, it was a significant thermal microclimate. The tightly woven papyrus mat was a brilliant insulator, blocking not only the light but also a substantial amount of the sun's radiant heat energy. The area of coverage was equally impressive. The curved design cast a shadow that enveloped the entire head, torso, and upper legs of the seated person, a full body shield that moved with them. This was the key to its practicality. A nobleman being carried in a litter or walking slowly in a procession would remain in this cone of coolness indefinitely. The sunshade was more than a status symbol, it was a highly effective piece of mobile environmental engineering. It transformed an unbearable exposure into a tolerable, even comfortable condition. This simple technology allowed the administrative class to work, travel, and govern outdoors for extended periods without succumbing to heat exhaustion. It makes you realize their entire society was structured around these layered defenses, from the linen on their skin to the portable shade over their heads. But what about when they went indoors? How did they engineer their homes and palaces to continue the fight against the heat once the door was closed? Their architectural genius turned entire cities into collective sun shields. The ancient Egyptians did not simply build shelters from the heat, they engineered their homes and streets to manipulate the sun's path itself. A typical dwelling in a workers' village like the one at Deir el-Medina was a masterclass in passive cooling. The entire structure was a thermal fortress built from one of the most abundant and effective materials available, the mud brick. These were not thin, flimsy walls. They were massively thick, sometimes several feet deep, acting as a giant thermal battery. Through the cool night, these dense bricks would slowly release the stored cold, keeping the interior comfortable. Then, as the scorching day arrived, the walls would begin to absorb the tremendous heat, preventing it from penetrating the living spaces for hours. By the time the outer surface was baking hot, the sun was already setting and the cycle would reverse. This was architecture working in harmony with the daily rhythm of the desert. The exterior of these houses was almost entirely unadorned, presenting a blank, windowless face to the outside world, especially on the western side that faced the brutal afternoon sun. This defensive posture minimized the surface area exposed to direct radiation. The entrance was not a grand doorway, but a small, low opening, often shielded by a projecting wall or a covered porch that cast a deep shadow, preventing the sun from ever reaching the interior threshold. Inside, the design focused everything around a central, open-air courtyard. This was the heart of the home's climate control system. The courtyard was strategically positioned to capture the prevailing north wind, funneling cool air into the surrounding rooms. The rooms themselves had only tiny, slit-like windows set high on the walls. These apertures were not for views, they were precision air vents. Their placement allowed hot air to rise and escape while pulling cooler air from the shaded courtyard below, creating a constant, gentle cross breeze without any moving parts. The entire house became a living, breathing system that actively rejected the sun's heat. Every family, from the laborer to the noble, lived within walls that were not just shelter, but a sophisticated machine for maintaining life. This was urban planning on a human scale, where every street was narrow and winding, not by accident but by design, ensuring the buildings cast cooling shadows upon each other for most of the day. How did this intimate, domestic wisdom scale up to protect the treasures of the gods and the bodies of the kings themselves? We reconstructed a single ancient Egyptian home, a perfect cube of sun-baked mud brick with a single small door and a central courtyard open to the sky. Inside this miniature fortress, we placed a grid of temperature sensors, while another set recorded the harsh conditions outside. For 7 days, we let the desert sun tell its story. The first afternoon revealed the staggering efficiency of this ancient design. Outside, the temperature soared to a blistering 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet inside the replica house, the sensors told a different tale. The main living room, shielded by those massively thick walls, registered a full 25 degrees cooler. It was not merely shade, it was a profound thermal lag created by the mud brick itself. The dense earth had absorbed the night's cold and was slowly releasing it, fighting a deliberate, winning battle against the encroaching daytime heat. The true genius, however, was in the airflow. A gentle but constant breeze, captured by the courtyard's design, flowed through the high slit windows and across the rooms. This wasn't stagnant, trapped air. It was a living, moving atmosphere that carried heat out and pulled coolness in. The temperature directly in the sun-baked courtyard was hot, of course, but it acted as a chimney, constantly drawing the hottest air up and out, which in turn pulled cooler air from the shaded rooms below. The entire structure functioned like a lung, breathing slowly and steadily to maintain its own comfortable internal climate. This was not just architecture, it was a machine built from earth and air, a testament to a civilization that did not fight their environment, but learned to use its own rules to build a sustainable oasis from the heat. If a simple home could achieve this, what impossible feats of cooling did they engineer for their most sacred spaces, the dark, silent hearts of their eternal stone mountains? This final layer of protection was not woven or built but poured directly onto the skin. Beyond their linen armor and kohl-lined eyes, the ancient Egyptians relied on a more intimate defense, a daily ritual of anointing their bodies with oils and unguents. These were not the lightweight moisturizers of today, but rich, viscous substances pressed from the very land they lived on. Castor oil, extracted from a common local plant, was a popular choice, prized for its thick, almost sticky consistency. Olive oil, traded and cultivated, provided a smoother alternative. For others, it was the rendered fat of animals, a simple, accessible grease. The act of applying these substances was likely a familiar part of the morning routine, a sensory experience of slick, cool oil spreading over skin soon to be warmed by the rising sun. The primary purpose of this ritual was clear: to combat the desert's profound dryness. In an environment where humidity was a rare gift, the skin would lose its precious moisture to the parched air in a matter of hours. These oils and fats created a powerful occlusive barrier, a microscopic layer that sealed the skin's own water in, preventing the rapid dehydration that could lead to cracking, irritation, and a painful, leathery texture. This alone was a critical medical act, preserving the integrity of their largest organ against the elements. But this barrier may have served a second, more subtle function against the sun itself. A layer of thick oil spread evenly across the skin would have acted as a rudimentary physical sunscreen. While it would not have blocked ultraviolet radiation in the sophisticated way a modern chemical sunscreen does, it would have created a slick, reflective surface. Think of the way a thin sheen of oil on water catches the light, creating a shimmering mirror. On human skin, this oily layer would have scattered and reflected a portion of the sun's direct rays, deflecting them away from the skin before they could cause a burn. It would have been especially effective against the drying, burning effect of the wind, which can exacerbate sun damage. The protection would have been imperfect, certainly not the total block we expect today, but it was a meaningful, available defense. For a farmer spending his day in the fields, this oily shield, combined with his linen clothing and headcloth, created a comprehensive, multi-layered system. His skin was hydrated, his core temperature regulated by breathable fabric, and his most vulnerable features guarded. This was not a single miracle solution, but a symphony of interlocking protections, each one addressing a different facet of the sun's relentless assault. The final defense was a layer of oil sealing the body against the desert's thirst. But did these ancient emollients truly hold a protective power, or were they merely a comforting ritual? To answer this, we moved from the open desert into a controlled laboratory, a chamber where we could command the sun and wind. We gathered volunteers and prepared two substances. One was a modern, high-end moisturizer with a complex list of humectants and ceramides. The other was a painstakingly recreated ancient blend of cold-pressed castor and moringa oils, thickened with a trace of beeswax, exactly as residue found in tombs had suggested. Each volunteer applied the modern cream to one forearm and the slick, fragrant ancient oil to the other. Then they placed their arms inside a specialized testing apparatus, a clear chamber where powerful lamps mimicked the solar spectrum and focused fans generated a constant drying wind. For 2 hours, this simulated a full day of exposure along the Nile. The results were measured WITH Chinese letter instruments both before and after the test, a corneometer which reads the skin's electrical capacitance to measure water content, told the first part of the story. The arm treated with the modern moisturizer showed a respectable performance, retaining a good amount of its initial hydration. But the arm coated in the ancient oil blend registered a significantly higher moisture level. The thick, occlusive nature of the oils had created a near-impenetrable barrier, dramatically slowing the rate of water loss from the skin into the artificially dry air. The second measurement came from a device called a mexameter, which uses specific light wavelengths to quantify redness and inflammation. Here, the difference was even more striking. The skin under the modern cream showed a clear pinkening, a visible inflammatory response to the simulated sun. The skin protected by the ancient oil, however, remained noticeably less red. The oil had not acted like a modern sunscreen that absorbs UV rays, but rather as a physical shield. It formed a slick, reflective layer on the skin's surface, scattering a portion of the light and creating a barrier against the drying wind, which alone can exacerbate sun damage. The final assessment was simply tactile. After the test, volunteers reported that the arm with the modern cream felt tight and slightly irritated. The arm treated with the ancient oil, in contrast, felt supple, smooth, and remarkably comfortable. This was not a perfect sunblock, but it was a profoundly effective environmental shield. It proved that their daily anointing was a deeply practical act, a way to armor the skin against both dehydration and the immediate, burning aggression of a day under Ra's gaze. This intimate, personal layer of protection completes the picture of a society that thought about survival from the skin out, wrapping themselves in a symphony of defenses that were as elegant as they were essential. While the elite enjoyed portable shade, the common laborer relied on a toolkit of simple, hard-worn adaptations perfected for survival. For the farmer knee-deep in irrigation channels, the quarryman shaping granite blocks, and the fisherman hauling nets on the Nile, sun protection was not a luxury, it was a non-negotiable part of the job description. Their strategies were defined by accessibility, durability, and a deep, intuitive understanding of the sun's daily rhythm. The first adjustment was to time itself. The workday was ruthlessly scheduled around the heat. Labor began at the first crack of dawn when the air still held the night's coolness. The most strenuous tasks, like moving heavy stones or plowing fields, were completed in these early hours. As the sun climbed toward its zenith, the pace would slow. By midday, when the heat became a physical force, work often stopped altogether. This was a mandatory pause, a time for rest in whatever sliver of shade could be found, for rehydration, and for waiting out the sun's most brutal assault. Work would then resume in the late afternoon as the long shadows returned and the temperature became bearable once more. This was not laziness, it was a collective, life-preserving policy written by experience. Their clothing was their most personal piece of field equipment. While the noble's klaft was a rectangle of linen, the laborer often wore a simpler, more effective design, a wider-brimmed hat woven from reeds or straw. This conical hat, seen in tomb paintings of field workers, provided a full circle of shade for the face, neck, and shoulders, a crucial advantage for someone bent over crops or tools who could not always adjust their position to avoid the light. Their loincloths or shenty were often longer and more substantial than the versions worn by the elite indoors, providing greater coverage for the thighs and knees during long hours of kneeling or squatting. They worked bare-chested not to cool off, but because a sweat-soaked linen tunic would become heavy and chafe, so they relied instead on a constant sheen of protective animal fat or oil applied to their skin, creating that reflective, hydrating barrier we tested. Every element was pragmatic. A farmer might soak his simple linen headcloth in the Nile water before wrapping it, creating an evaporative cooler that could stave off heat stroke for precious extra hours. A builder might use mud from the riverbank to coat his shoulders and back, a primitive but effective paste that combined physical sun blocking with continuous cooling as the water within it slowly evaporated. This was sun protection stripped down to its most essential, robust form, integrated so completely into the rhythm of work that it became as natural as breathing. The true measure of any protection is a full day's labor under the Egyptian sun. To understand the complete system in motion, we asked a volunteer to live as an ancient laborer would from dawn until dusk. His name was Mark, and his task was simple: to reconstruct a section of a mud brick wall using only ancient methods and defenses. His toolkit was a woven reed basket, a wooden hoe for mixing mud, and the layered sun protection of the common worker. At sunrise, he began by applying a thick layer of our recreated castor oil blend across his shoulders, back, and arms. He then wrapped himself in a loose linen kilt and a simple reed hat, its wide brim casting a full circle of shade over his face and neck. A dampened linen klaft was wrapped around his head, a trick we learned from tomb inscriptions. His day was governed by the sun's arc, not a clock. The first hours were a burst of productive energy, mixing the straw and mud, packing the bricks into wooden molds, and laying the first courses of the wall. He wore a sensor pack that tracked his heart rate, skin temperature, and hydration levels, silently recording the data. By mid-morning, the sun's intensity began to change the nature of his work. The initial brisk pace gave way to a more deliberate, measured rhythm. The data showed his core temperature beginning to climb, but his heart rate remained surprisingly steady, a sign that his body was not yet in distress. The evaporative cooling from his damp headcloth was actively fighting the rising heat, and the linen kilt allowed a constant breeze to flow over his skin, preventing the sweat from becoming a sticky, insulating layer. He took his first real break as the sun approached its zenith, retreating to the shadow of a half-built wall just as an ancient worker would have. He drank water infused with a little salt, another historical practice to replenish lost electrolytes. This was not a lazy pause, it was a critical, scheduled cool-down. The thermal camera showed the heat signature on his skin slowly receding from an angry red back to a calmer orange during this rest. The afternoon session was a test of endurance. The sun was lower, but the accumulated heat from the ground and the bricks themselves radiated back at him. This is where the multi-layered defense proved its worth. The oil on his skin had sealed in moisture, preventing the dry, dusty air from sucking the water from his pores. His reed hat kept the direct glare off his face, allowing him to see his work without squinting. The loose weave of his kilt continued to ventilate. When he finally stopped at dusk, the data told a compelling story. His skin showed only minimal redness, far less than a modern control subject wearing a cotton t-shirt and baseball cap would have exhibited. His core temperature had fluctuated but had never reached dangerous levels. His energy, while depleted, was not shattered. He reported a profound sense of fatigue, but not the dizzying, nauseating exhaustion of heatstroke. He had been hot, he had been tired, but he had been protected. This was the ultimate validation, not of a single item, but of an integrated lifestyle. Every element, from the timing of his work to the oil on his skin and the hat on his head, worked in concert. It was a symphony of adaptation, each note perfectly tuned to counter a specific challenge posed by the sun. Survival was not about a single miracle invention, but about weaving 100 small, smart defenses into the very fabric of the day. This holistic approach makes their architectural achievements all the more staggering, for they were built by people who had first mastered the art of protecting the human body itself. For an Egyptian soldier on campaign, the sun was a strategic adversary as dangerous as any human foe. His survival and the success of his army depended on a military-grade sun doctrine. While a farmer could rest at midday, a soldier marching through hostile territory did not always have that luxury. His uniform was his first layer of engineered defense. Unlike the laborer's simple kilt, a soldier often wore a more substantial, wrapped garment that provided greater coverage for his legs and torso, made from a heavier, more durable grade of linen to withstand the rigors of travel and combat. His head was protected not by a simple klaft, but by a thick, padded linen helmet, sometimes reinforced with leather strips. This helmet was designed to absorb the impact of a blow, but its dense, layered construction also served as a superior thermal insulator against the sun's radiant heat beating down on his scalp. The army's entire operational rhythm was dictated by the sun's movements. Forced marches were frequently conducted at night. under the cool canopy of stars, a column of soldiers could cover vast distances without expending their precious water reserves on cooling their bodies and without the demoralizing exhaustion of a daytime trek. The desert chill was a far lesser enemy than the solar furnace of the day. When the army had to move during daylight, their formations were not just for defense against arrows, but also for collective shade. Soldiers would march in tighter, more compact columns, each man benefiting from the shadow cast by the comrade in front of him. This was not a significant shadow, but over hours, every sliver of reprieve mattered. During the midday halt, when the army was most vulnerable to heat stroke and lethargy, their discipline created a survival grid. Instead of men scattering randomly to find individual spots of shade, units would rest in organized rows or in the long, collective shadow of a cliff face or a line of supply carts. This ensured that the entire fighting force was resting efficiently, recovering together, and ready to move as one when the sun's power began to wane. Their commanders understood that a sun-addled soldier was a useless soldier, one who could not hold his shield steady or draw his bow with accuracy. The army's sun strategy was not about comfort, but about maintaining the sharp, deadly edge of the entire military machine. This orchestrated dance with the sun raises a final, profound question. If their knowledge was so advanced, why did this ancient wisdom eventually fade from our collective memory, leaving us to rediscover its principles millennia later? A column of soldiers moves across the desert, their formation tight and disciplined under the punishing sun. To test the ancient military doctrine of sun protection, we organized a full-scale recreation of a 20-mile march. Two teams were assembled, each carrying the same weight in gear and water. The first team, our control group, wore modern desert camouflage, wide-brimmed boonie hats, and used high SPF sunscreen. The second team was equipped as New Kingdom Egyptian soldiers, wrapped in layered linen garments, their heads protected by thick, padded linen helmets, and their skin coated in the same castor oil blend. Their strategy, however, was their true weapon, a series of tactics dictated by scrolls and tomb paintings. They began their march not at dawn, but in the cool of the very early morning, aiming to cover the majority of their distance before the sun reached its peak. They moved in a tight, compact column, each soldier walking in the slight but cumulative shadow of the man in front, a living windbreak against the sun's direct assault. The data collected from their sensor packs and direct observation told a story of two different philosophies of survival. The modern group, with their advanced fabrics and chemical sunblocks, started strong. But as the hours wore on and the heat intensified, their condition began to diverge sharply from the ancient team. The modern sunscreen, effective against burning, required reapplication after sweating, a process that cost precious time and water. Their synthetic uniforms, while designed to wick moisture, began to trap heat against the body as the pace slowed, showing a steady rise in core temperature readings. The Egyptian team, in contrast, maintained a remarkably steady physiological state. Their layered linen, though appearing heavy, acted as a breathable buffer. The air flowing through the fabric constantly evaporated the sweat and oil on their skin, creating a sustainable cooling effect. The padded helmet was a revelation, its dense layers insulating the scalp from the radiant heat that baked the modern group's thinner hats. When the sun was at its absolute worst, high overhead, the Egyptian team executed a tactical halt. They did not sprawl randomly, but organized their rest in a single, long line to maximize the collective shade of a rocky outcrop, just as the ancient manuals suggested. They drank water infused with salt and a little vinegar, a historical rehydration solution. The control group, during their own break, consumed plain water. The final assessment was stark. After the march, the modern team showed a 30% higher rate of mild heat stress symptoms, including headaches and dizziness. Their skin, despite the sunscreen, showed more widespread redness and irritation from the combined heat and sweat. The ancient team was fatigued, certainly, but their vitals were more stable, their energy depletion less severe, and their skin showed significantly less inflammation, protected by the oil's dual hydrating and reflective barrier. The true measure of ingenuity was in their water consumption. The Egyptian team used 15% less water to achieve the same result, a staggering logistical advantage for an army operating in barren territory. This was not just about clothing, it was a system, a deeply understood logistics of the human body in a hostile environment. The pharaoh's armies could project power across vast distances because they had learned to march with the sun, not against it. A child's skin is far more vulnerable to the sun's harsh rays than an adult's, a biological reality the ancient Egyptians clearly understood. Their approach to protecting the young was woven into the very fabric of daily life, a combination of physical barriers and structured routines. In the art that has survived the millennia, children are frequently depicted wearing the same simple linen headcloths as their parents. These were not miniature versions of adult fashion, but essential gear. A child playing in a sun-drenched courtyard would have their delicate scalp, neck, and ears shielded by this familiar wrap, its light color reflecting heat and its loose weave allowing their smaller bodies to stay cool. It is almost certain they also wore kohl around their eyes from a very young age. This was not merely a cultural tradition, but a critical medical practice. In an era before antibiotics, preventing the eye infections that could swiftly lead to blindness was a matter of survival. The lead-based kohl paste would have created a sterile, protective barrier against the dust and flies that were a constant presence, all while sharpening their vision against the blinding glare of the whitewashed walls and sandy ground where they played. The application of protective oils to their skin was likely a daily ritual performed by a parent, a soothing layer of castor or moringa oil that would lock in moisture and provide a subtle, reflective shield against the drying wind and sun. But the most significant protection was architectural and social. The design of an Egyptian home, with its windowless exterior walls and central, shaded courtyard, created a naturally protected environment for a child. The courtyard was the heart of the family's world, a safe, enclosed space where children could play and learn under a strip of open sky, yet remain largely sheltered from the direct, punishing overhead sun for most of the day. The social rhythm of the community further minimized risk. During the most intense heat of the midday, when laborers were forced to rest, the entire household would retreat into the cool, dark interior rooms. A child would be indoors, napping or engaged in quiet activities, while the world outside became a shimmering furnace. This was a collective, unconscious strategy where the very timing of life and the design of shelter conspired to keep the young safe. Their protection was not an isolated act, but a seamless part of a culture that had learned to build its entire world as a refuge from the sun. This deep, inherited wisdom raises a final, haunting question. If their knowledge was so profound and so effective, why did these brilliant strategies eventually vanish from common practice, leaving modern science to rediscover them thousands of years later? Placing ancient Egyptian sun protection side by side with our modern arsenal reveals a story not of inferiority, but of brilliant adaptation. Their entire system was built on a philosophy of managing light and heat through physical barriers and passive cooling, a stark contrast to our chemical and technological approach. Their most effective defense, the lightweight linen clothing, proved remarkably adept at blocking ultraviolet radiation while maintaining crucial airflow. Our modern synthetic fabrics often trap heat, creating a personal greenhouse effect even as they block the sun. The ancient solution was a masterclass in balance. Where they truly excelled was in integrated design. The kohl around their eyes was a 2-for-1 solution, simultaneously cutting blinding glare and likely fighting infection, a dual purpose most modern sunglasses cannot claim. Their architectural use of thick mud brick walls and strategic ventilation created comfortable indoor temperatures without a single watt of electricity, a feat that puts many of our own energy-guzzling air-conditioned homes to shame. Their methods were holistic, woven into the very fabric of their clothing, the timing of their workdays, and the layout of their cities. This was a sustainable, zero-energy system perfected over centuries. The gaps in their protection, however, are equally revealing. Their reliance on oils and fats for skin protection, while excellent for preventing moisture loss and offering some reflective shielding, was a blunt instrument compared to the targeted molecular defense of a modern broad-spectrum sunscreen. Our lotions contain specific compounds engineered to absorb high-energy ultraviolet rays before they can damage skin cells, a level of microscopic precision they could never achieve. Their solutions were macro, ours are micro. They protected the body as a whole system while we often focus on defending individual skin cells. This difference highlights their constraints. Without modern chemistry, they could not create a transparent, lightweight sunblock that selectively neutralizes harmful radiation. They worked with what they had: earth, plants, and minerals, and from those simple ingredients, they built a comprehensive culture of survival. Their genius lies not in matching our technology, but in their profound understanding of the environment and their ingenious use of its own rules to build a life within it. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most advanced solution is not the most complex one, but the one most harmoniously integrated with the world. The legacy of the ancient Egyptians is not merely written in stone, but woven into the very logic of survival. They were true masters of their environment, architects of a multi-layered existence where sun protection was inseparable from daily life. Their brilliance lay not in a single invention, but in a holistic system where every element worked in concert. The linen that clothed them, the coal that sharpened their vision, the oils that sealed their skin, and the cities that sheltered them were all part of an integrated defense. This was a culture that understood its world with a profound intimacy, turning simple flax, earth, and minerals into a sophisticated toolkit for life under the relentless sun. Their methods were a perfect blend of stark practicality and deep spirituality, where protecting the body was a way of honoring the gods. So we turn this final question over to you. After this journey into their world, which of their ancient defenses would you be most curious to try for yourself? Would it be the surprising coolness of a linen headcloth, the sharpened vision from coal-lined eyes, or the protective sheen of castor oil on a sunny day? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed unraveling this mystery, subscribe for more journeys into the forgotten wisdom of the past.